Okay, this is the Year 8 Adaptation and Inheritance unit. Now, some of the facts that we're going to go through today is probably going to be all taught again right at the end of Year 11. Okay, so it's taught right again at the end of Year 11, right? Then it'd be good to have a bit of a good idea about it now. Right, firstly, evolution. Evolution is the process by which living things can gradually change over time. So, for example, humans are generally getting taller. Giraffes are gradually getting taller. Lions are gradually getting bigger. And there's all sorts of kind of different evolution stories. But basically, the reason for evolution is the characteristics, right, enable individuals to survive are then passed on to the next generation. Right, so the best characteristics are passed on. So the biggest lion is obviously being the biggest and the strongest. They are then passed on through their offspring. Now, evolution, it was Charles Darwin, and he actually wrote a book called The Origin of the Species in 1859. Right, it wasn't accepted immediately. Right, it was only slowly accepted. Right, but it challenged, or the biggest theory was the fact that it challenged the creation theory, which was God. Okay, and there was insufficient evidence at the time, and they didn't really know how inheritance was sort of spread or developed, or the mechanism of actually happening. Okay, that's why it kind of wasn't accepted. But Charles Darwin's main kind of theory was something called Darwin's finches, where there was a number of islands, and each one of the islands had a different type of finch on it. And what those finches, they couldn't kind of link up, or they couldn't breed between each other because the islands were far enough apart. And each one of the finches developed differently based on the food. So if it was an island that had lots of kind of trees where they had to get food out of bark of trees, they had a certain type of bill. If there was nuts on the island, they developed a different type of bill for breaking nuts. Okay, so that's when he kind of came up with the original theory. Okay, you need to know about extinction. Okay, so extinction is when no members of a species survive. A couple of examples is the dodo, very, very famous, hunted to extinction, and dogs and rats also played their part. In North America, there used to be something called the passenger pigeon, and there was billions of them, but then what they were is they were hunted until there was none left. The Tasmanian tiger, right, was again in Tasmania, was an animal that was again hunted to extinction and kind of just got rid of. Okay, so that's what extinction is. Reasons why. All right, so what you need to do is you need to remember kind of good 6 or 7 of these. Right, so asteroid strikes, that wiped out the dinosaurs. Climate change, right, if the earth gets colder or the earth gets hotter, then certain animals aren't going to be able to live. Better adapted competition. Grey squirrels in the UK compared to red squirrels in the UK. Grey squirrels are bigger and more aggressive, and what they are is they are adapted better. So eventually, red squirrels are going to really, really diminish more than they have. Certain diseases. Human predation, right? They killed off the dodo along with dogs and rats. Lack of genetic diversity, so if there's not many, then what can happen is the genes can become a problem. Loss of habitat. An invasive species like rats, or in Australia, the rabbits kind of took over, and massive numbers of rabbits ended up being in Australia, and it caused massive problems to other animals that were there. Lack of food, and potentially pollution. So what you need to do now is you need to remember, let's say, I don't know, you need to remember all of them, okay? And then what you can do then is you're then going to know everything about extinction. The final thing is variation. Right, so evolution, right, one of the big parts of it is the fact that there is variation. And what children do is they inherit characteristics from their parents, and each child gets a combination of those characters. So if you think about you, you've got half from your mum, half from your dad, and that is then called inherited variation. You also get another type of variation, which is environmental variation. So if you've got an identical twin that lives in Brazil and another one that lives in Siberia, the one in Brazil will be darker, right? They may well not have as much food, so they might be slimmer. One that lives in Siberia, right, they'll be paler because they haven't got the sun, right? And then they will eat more because there's nothing else to do. Okay, so that is then environmental variation. So there's 2 types. Right, now what you need to do is you need to write down what evolution is, okay, and then the reason why evolution. Then what you need to do is you need to write down extinction, right, and list me all the different ways an extinction could possibly happen, and give maybe 2 or 3 examples. The final thing, you need to write down now the 2 types of variation. And if you can do all that, then that's fantastic.